What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the True Crime Society podcast with Stephanie and Olivia. As you guys already know, this is going to be the second episode about a murder involving CTE. Our last episode was about WWE superstar Chris Benoit, who murder-suicided his son and wife, and it was a big shock in 2007. Today we're going to talk about the ex-NFL player Phillip Adams, who recently murdered his doctor's wife, their two grandchildren, and two air conditioner repairmen that were doing work at the home before killing himself. It's actually just Stephanie right now because we did record that all meant to be one episode, but ended up being so long that we broke it up into two, so I had to record a new intro for this. I'm sorry if I sound a little miserable. I just got my second COVID vaccine yesterday and I feel super crappy. I don't really feel fevery or anything like that, but my whole body is so sore. But I'm still going to finish editing this podcast and I'm going to get it out tomorrow for you guys. So just remember, put my blood, sweat, and tears into this. But I hope you guys enjoy it. And we will be back next time with a regular intro. Okay, so CTE and the NFL. So like I said earlier, a lot of people know the story of Aaron Hernandez. It was kind of the big story that kind of brought this to mainstream attention. Aaron Hernandez played for the Patriots, believed he had CTE, murdered a few people, and then killed himself. Won't get into that because most people know the story. But that prompted more people to kind of look into CTE in regards to contact sports. So in 2017, a study from Boston University CTE Center says that CTE is more common among football players than previously thought. Researchers found CTE in 99% of the examined brains of former NFL players.
It's crazy.
I know. It was what I was like, that can't be right. The CTE percentage was 91% among the brains of college players and 21% among high school players. So for the study, researchers first had to begin with gathering brains. So they got 202 brains of football players donated. And I saw in an article about this, they said it was easier to kind of get the families to donate their brains when it was suspected that they might have CTE.
Yeah, people looking for a reason. I'm assuming a lot of these people who died were probably quite young as well. So looking for a reason, maybe.
Well, yeah, like they did high school players. They did some like pre-high school players. So it's like, those were dead people.
Yeah.
Pathologists, knowing nothing of the patient's history or symptoms, examined each brain for the evidence of CTE. Then at the same time, clinicians used the medical records of these people in interviews with family members to collect detailed information about the patient's medical history and symptoms. So they both did that separately without knowing what the other one was doing. So the group would meet regularly for consensus meetings where then the pathologists and the clinicians would discuss the findings with each other and decide who they think had CTE and what. Of the 202 brains studied, the group diagnosed 177 of those brains with CTE. For the NFL players, it was 99%, and it was 110 of 111 brains had CTE from the NFL player group. So all of them but one. From the Canadian Football League, it was 88%, 7 out of 8. For semi-professional players, it was 64%, with 9 out of 14. For college players, it was 91%, with 48 out of 53 brains showing CTE. And for high school players, 21%, with 3 out of 14. So they also studied the brains of 2 pre-high school players, and neither was diagnosed with CTE. The brains of former high school players showed mild pathology, while the majority of college, semi-professional, and professional players showed severe pathology. The researchers observed clinical symptoms such as depression, anxiety, memory loss, and other moods and behavior impairments, even in patients with fairly mild CTE pathology. So that just goes to show you how many football players, contact sport players it affects and could potentially affect, and what types of symptoms they were having, and it's kind of crazy.
We were watching the NRL here, which is, the National Rugby League here last night, and one guy literally got knocked out, lay on the field, was totally 100% out of it, and came back on the field maybe 10, 15 minutes later.
Yeah, that's like exactly what we're saying. That's probably another one too. That's just, it's not as big of a thing.
Yeah. So the next case we're going to speak about today is that of Phillip Adams. It's a really recent case. It only happened on April 7, so 10 days ago-ish at the time of recording. The former professional NFL player Phillip Adams shot and killed 6 people, and then he turned the gun on himself in Rock Hill, South Carolina.
Tonight, authorities searching for a motive behind the horrific mass murder in the quiet town of Rock Hill, South Carolina.
We've got four down inside the house.
A prominent local doctor, Robert Lesslie, his wife Barbara, and 2 grandchildren, 9-year-old Ada and 5-year-old Noah, gunned down in their home. Outside, 38-year-old James Lewis, who had been working at the property, also found dead. A co-worker seriously wounded. Authorities launching a desperate manhunt.
The description we're given was a black male wearing black clothing, carrying something red, possible automatic gun.
That search would lead them to a former NFL player, Phillip Adams, who was found barricaded inside his parents' home nearby. After an hours-long standoff, police entered to find Adams dead of a self-inflicted gunshot wound.
Intercepted by Phillip Adams.
Adams spent 6 injury-riddled seasons in the NFL, playing for 6 teams and suffering at least 2 concussions within a 3-game period in 2012. He retired in 2015.
So to start with, we'll just go through quickly who Phillip Adams was. He was born on July 20, 1988 in Rock Hill, and so he was around 32 at the time this all occurred. He attended Rock Hill High School and he played both basketball and football there. He was a cornerback out of South Carolina State, and he was the 7th round NFL pick in 2010. He was never a real standout in the league, but he did play 78 games over 5 seasons, and he played for teams including San Francisco 49ers, New England Patriots, Seattle Seahawks, Oakland Raiders, New York Jets, and the Atlanta Falcons. His best seasons came in 2 years in Oakland, where he appeared in 31 games and recorded a pair of interceptions. He finished his career with the Falcons in 2015, and he earned just over $3 million during his 6 NFL seasons.
Not bad for a not standout player.
Yeah, I know, it's not bad at all.
They make so much money.
He suffered multiple injuries over the course of his career, including a pair of concussions in 2012, and despite that, he only missed 1 game that season. In 2010, he also had a severe ankle injury that required surgery, which included several screws being inserted into his leg. I tried to have a look and see if I could find anything about his personal life online. I couldn't see if he has a partner or children or anything like that. As far as I know, he didn't. I could be wrong, but it's just not public if he does. His obituary was online, and it just says, he departed this life on Wednesday, April 7. Viewing will be at this time. Funeral service will be private, and the family has requested donations to the Peter O'Donnell Jr. Brain Institute. That's it. Gives nothing else about his life.
Someone commented on either Reddit or a website and said it was like someone local to the area that like knew of the doctor and all them. I think that they said that Phillip Adams might have had 1 kid, but I've never seen that listed anywhere officially, like you were saying. So I don't know. It's maybe they're not saying that on purpose, or if that person was wrong.
I'm assuming if there are family, especially probably children, they haven't listed them just to kind of keep them private after this, hopefully.
Which makes sense, but
yeah,
if he does have a kid, sad too, because that's another
very
person
sad.
affected.
So what happened on April 7, 2021? At around 4:45 p.m. on Wednesday, which was April 7, the York County Sheriff's Department received 2 911 calls.
I saw the guy running around, and I heard the popping, but I didn't realize it was shooting until I saw this guy laying on the ground.
So the first call was from a man who said he heard around 20 gunshots coming from his neighbor's house. He said, I think we've had some trouble. I think there's been a bad shooting, maybe 4 people. I don't know how he deduced that from 20 gunshots.
That's what I was thinking too.
But anyway, maybe he knew. I know. Maybe he knew there were 4 people in the house. I don't know. Anyway, it just seems like a weird deduction from 20 gunshots. Anyway. The other call came from a man who said his co-worker Robert Shook called him and said that he'd been shot and asked him to call 911. I don't know why Robert didn't call 911, but anyway, maybe I feel
like if you're shot in the face, maybe you're just kind of call the last person you spoke to.
Yeah, he might have just clicked, I guess there's a million reasons why. But the caller said Robert was slurring his speech, and then he thought that he'd been struck in the head or the face.
I just had one call me screaming that he had been shot, and the other technician has also been shot and not responsive.
So less than 10 minutes later, people arrived at the home of the Lesslie family, and they found Robert Shook wounded and his colleague James Lewis dead in the driveway of the home. Robert Shook and James Lewis were air conditioning technicians who were working on the home. Robert Shook was in a critical condition and he was rushed to the hospital, but he passed away 4 days later on April 11. Inside the home, they found another Robert, so it's a little bit confusing, but Dr. Robert Lesslie, who was 70 years old, was found dead along with his wife, Barbara, who was 69, their 2 grandchildren, 9-year-old Ada and 5-year-old Noah. The investigators found evidence that identified the killer as 32-year-old Phillip Adams. When I was watching some clips on this, I saw that they said that when they were trying to find him, it was a black male wearing black clothing and he was holding something red. So I think they were insinuating that the gun was red. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know exactly how they knew it was him so quickly because it seemed like it was pretty quick for them to find him.
It seems like they figured out who it was pretty quickly. It made me wonder if maybe Robert was kind of able to give them more information, and I know like his parents live nearby. So
I was going to say, like, I know around here if there's someone who's a little bit of a celebrity, like, you know, an ex-football player or someone, everyone kind of knows where they are or where they live. Like, you'll drive past and be like, that's that person's house. So, you know, everyone knows. So maybe it was the same kind of thing there.
Maybe he was that ex-NFL player.
So the police started looking for Phillip straight away. They spent hours with helicopters, canines, and police scouring the area before they located him at his parents' home on Marshall Road, which was a quarter mile from the property. So I don't know why they didn't go there first. Maybe they didn't realise that the parents lived there first, but whatever. Adam's father, Alonzo, said officers came to the house on Wednesday and led him and his disabled wife out of the residence. A neighbour of theirs, who was named Alison Hope, said she lives across from them and the police allowed her back into her house at 9 p.m. that night. Moments later, a vehicle pulled into the driveway of I'm assuming, the Phillips house, and law enforcement surrounded the property. She said officers spent hours negotiating with Adams using a loudspeaker and they sent in a robot to scan the house. They asked him repeatedly to come out and they promised to get his mother out safely, and then Adams shot himself. Alison, who's the neighbour, said, "This is something I can't grasp yet. I can't put it all together and I'm trying to. I witnessed it. I feel bad for him because if it was mental or something going on in his life or whatever, you know, he needed help, and that's the sad part."
I don't get why they let her back into her house.
No, when it was still going on.
That's what I was so confused about.
And yeah, I didn't get that either, but maybe they knew he was in there. But yeah, you'd think they'd be keeping everyone out if they could.
Yeah, instead of just like, all right, you can have a front row seat to the action.
So we'll speak about the victims here because it's so sad because one entire family has lost, you know, their grandparents, their children. Anyway, I'll go into it now. But
and the Dr. Lesslie and his wife seem so cute.
I know, like his website, he's got his own website, Robert Lesslie, and their last name is lesslie.com. But we'll put it up on our blog too. So if you want to check out his website, it's really cute. He's got photos of his, well, you know, I think they've updated this since his passing because his obituary is up there and things like that. But it's photos of him and it says like believer, husband, father, grandfather, physician, caretaker of golden retrievers, donkeys, ponies, and goats. He seemed like a really nice guy. He was a primary care doctor in Rock Hill. He was board certified in both emergency medicine and occupational medicine, and he was the medical director and founder of Riverview House Calls, Riverview Hospice, and Palliative Care. So the Young County Sheriff spokesman Trent Farris described Dr. Lesslie as a pillar of the Rock Hill community. He said, "I've lived in Rock Hill my entire life and Dr. Lesslie was my doctor growing up. He's been one of those people that everyone knows. We are shocked that this type of incident happened here. None of us can figure out why. It doesn't happen here. It's one of those strange things that a lot of people are going to have a hard time understanding, and we just hope that everyone understands that we're going to do everything we can try to figure this out." So all their obituaries are up online now. Dr. Robert Lesslie and his wife Barbara have a joint obituary. It says that the Lord called them home together with 2 of their beloved grandchildren, and then it talks about their marriage. It says, authored by Robert and heavily edited by Barbara, the story of their lives is inspired first and foremost by the Holy Spirit. Robert and Barbara met and fell in love at Erskine College. They celebrated and tolerated one another's tomfoolery in marriage for more than 47 years. Their love spanned half a century and was the foundation that built a legacy of laughter, service, and devotion. And then it talks about how Barbara loved using a hot glue gun, Diet Coke, and song and dance. She never met a stranger she would not embrace. And it says, Robert is the quintessential Renaissance man who at any given moment could be found beekeeping, bagpiping, propagating both children and plants, riding, exercising, spoiling grandchildren, patching up aches and pains, and board gaming. They seem like really, really lovely people. I haven't seen anything negative said about them. Really sweet, kind people.
Yeah, makes me sad.
Yeah, and even sadder. It's not my place to judge, but their 2 grandchildren also passed away, and I believe that these 2 grandchildren were from the same family, if that makes sense. So this family now has no children left. From what I can tell, their mum and their dad lost their 2 children. So the 2 kids that passed were Ada Lesslie, who was 9, and Noah Lesslie, who was 5. They also have a joint obituary. It says, Ada was a precocious, riddle-loving and self-proclaimed book nerd, a title she shared with her mama. Noah confirmed that Ada was the best big sister. It's so sad. And then it goes on about Ada and how lovely she was. And then it says at 5 years old, Noah had already mastered the art of physical comedy. He would offer an unsolicited running hug at any given moment and from any direction. He would have crawled into his mama's skin while hugging her so tightly if that were an option.
Whoever wrote their obituaries did a great job.
Yeah. It just finishes with, undoubtedly, Ada and Noah knew and loved Jesus. They spoke openly about who Jesus is to them. Their understanding of and love for the gospel was evident even at their young ages. We take great comfort in knowing Ada and Noah are in heaven covered in glitter because they are with their nana and their mouths full of gum from their papa. Their mama and dada are waiting patiently to join them. Oh,
so
terrible.
Sad.
Yeah, it's terrible.
My name is Amy Kolbach, and this is Lori Alexander, and this is Robbie Lesslie. Along with Jeffrey, we are the children of Barbara and Robert, and the 3 of us up here get to call ourselves aunts and uncle to Ada and Noah. The past few days have been certainly filled with much suffering and grief, but also peppered with the most amazing treasures sent directly from God. I can't say anything better than what I'm about to share with you, which is one of those treasures. Ada Lesslie, from both sides of her family, inherited the love of music, and her parents discovered within the past few days that she wrote a song. And I am not going to sing it. She did not include the melody. But I will read it to you exactly as it is written. It is called You and Me. You and me, we can love one another, even through the hardest times, even through the darkest days. We can love one another. Even in the deepest fog, we will find one another and love each other. When people see us, they will see Jesus Christ in you and me. Ooh, 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 ooh.
So then one of the other victims was Robert Shook, who we spoke about. He was the air conditioning technician. He was a married father of 3, and his obituary lists his family as Hollycraft Shook of the home, a daughter Kelly Shook, and 2 sons, John Robert and Eli. His cousin Heather Michelle spoke to the media and said he's a hardworking man who put himself through school just to become a certified heating and air service worker to provide for his family. He's just a wonderful, wonderful man. So after he was shot, he did survive for a few days, as we said. He had multiple surgeries and fought for his life, but unfortunately he couldn't make it through.
So sad too.
Yeah. The final victim was James Lewis. So James was also an air conditioning technician who worked with Robert. He told his parents spoke to the local news station and said that he was their only child and was a single father of 3 children, a 16-year-old and 13-year-old twins. His father said, I keep on expecting to wake up. Oh, it's just a bad dream, but it's not. It's real. I would like to find out why this guy did what he did. So James's mother said that he was also working as an air conditioning technician to provide for his children. She said he helped anybody. He was a kind guy, a great dad. It's just so stupid. So there's a whole lot of people who have now lost their people. It's very, very sad for no apparent real reason.
So it's like the whole thing is crazy, but especially just like these 2 air conditioning guys who were probably there for a few hours that day, maybe an hour, who knows what they were doing. Just like talk about wrong place at the wrong fucking time.
I know, like, that's what I mean. Like sometimes you just think, gosh, when your time is up, it's up. No matter what, that was just a fluke for them to be there that day. They could have been running late. They could have finished early, just that they were there at this. I'm sure it didn't take long for it all to happen. It's crazy.
Yeah, so crazy.
So they began the investigation into kind of why this happened. Philip's father, Alonzo, told WCNC that his son, being a football player, was to blame for the tragedy. His father's told them, "I can say he's a good kid. I think the football messed him up." So Philip had recently moved in with his parents in Rock Hill, which was just a 2-minute drive from Dr. Leslie's home. Sheriff Tolson did a press conference and he read a statement from the Lesslie family, which said in part, "We know there are no answers that will satisfy the question why. We are sure of one thing. We do not grieve as those without hope." Sorry, I'm struggling with this. "Our hope is found in the promise of Jesus Christ, and we are enveloped by peace that surpasses all understanding. To that end, our hearts are bent towards forgiveness and peace, toward love and connectedness, towards celebration and unity." Philip's father, Alonzo, also spoke again, and he said, "All I can say is we pray for the family. He used to be my doctor a long time ago. I know they were good folks down there. We're going to keep them in our prayers." So they've confirmed that Philip's autopsy will include a CTE study. The York County coroner, Sabrina Gast, told the media that the autopsy of Mr. Adams is scheduled to be conducted at the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston. "Routine forensic autopsies do not identify CTE. We have contacted Boston University and they will be working with us to conduct a brain study to identify if Phillip Adams had CTE. We are unsure of the time for results at this time."
I think Boston University was who actually did Chris Benoit's too.
Maybe they're kind of the
that's
specialist.
like the place.
Yeah, place to go.
Well, investigators here are still trying to find out why Phillip Adams would murder 6 people, including 2 young kids. And tonight they're hoping a clue can be found in his brain.
I had headaches chronically for well over a decade.
Dr. Christopher Nowinski found success inside the squared circle, but a series of concussions forced him to tap out.
I got too many hits to the head, developed permanent symptoms, and sort of began a quest to understand why I couldn't get better.
The former Harvard football player turned professional wrestler turned neuroscientist started the Concussion Legacy Foundation. For nearly 15 years, he studied the effects of traumatic brain injuries on athletes, military veterans, and abuse victims.
Repeated hits to the head over time can cause a degenerative brain disease called chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, which can cause problems with thinking, behavior, mood, and can eventually lead to dementia.
A study by the Journal of the American Medical Association looked at the brains of 111 former NFL players. All but one had CTE. Nowinski says this rare degenerative brain disease can change who a person is and is researching whether it leads to aggressive and violent behavior.
All behavior is generated from the brain. And if we do find the brain is damaged, it might help us understand inappropriate or, in this case, horrible behavior.
Whether or not the gunman in the York County mass shooting had CTE remains to be seen.
So we're looking a little bit into Philip's background and his past behaviour. His agent, Scott Castelline, said that Philip often isolated himself even as a player. He said, "He was part of my family. I loved him. He's a great kid, a great guy. This is so unlike him. He had to not be in his right mind, obviously." He also said, "Seeing Philip shoot 2 kids, it's not him. I can't fathom it. It's devastating for the victims and the families. I knew he was hurting and missing football, but he wouldn't take the health tips offered to him. He said he would, but he wouldn't. I feel he was lost without football and depressed." So Phillip Adams did have a criminal record, which included an arrest in 2009 on charges of misdemeanor assault and battery, but he wasn't convicted. He was also arrested in Charlotte in 2016 for carrying a concealed gun. In 2009, his mother Phyllis was involved in a horrific car wreck that left her severely disabled and wheelchair-bound. He spoke to the Times and Democrat in 2010, and he spoke about his mum, and he said, "My mother is my motivation. We can look through life and you go through adversity. This is one of the biggest things I've had to deal with." His sister Lauren told USA Today that her brother had become unusually aggressive lately. His mental health degraded fast and terribly bad. There was unusual behaviour. there's people who are closest to him have said that he couldn't come to terms with the end of his NFL career, and then that he also had to undertake a caretaker role in his family. Like, obviously, I'm not justifying what he did, but being a caretaker is very stressful. Like, there would be a big adjustment for him to go from this kind of high-flying life to caring for his wheelchair-bound mother. So I don't doubt that contributed somehow to all of this going on. So there hasn't really been a motive confirmed 100% as yet. There is some speculation, and I think it's probably pretty confirmed, that Phillip at one point was a patient of Dr. Lesslie. US Congressman Ralph Norman described himself as a close friend of Dr. Lesslie and his wife, said that he was told by police that Dr. Lesslie had been withholding medication from Adams, who suffered multiple concussions in his football career, and this is what led to the attack. He said he was treating him and stopped giving him medicine, and that's what triggered the killings, from what I understand. So maybe, just speculating here, but maybe, Phillip was addicted to painkillers or whatever, and Dr. Lesslie wouldn't prescribe more. It's just, you know, it sounds to me that would probably be what that would go along the lines of.
Yeah, I mean, I used to work at a primary care doctor's office, and obviously people would be prescribed pain medication for various reasons. Like, at the time they needed it, but there was times where it got to the point where the doctors were concerned that they were abusing it, like they didn't need it anymore, but they were just kind of like pretending they needed it, or they were going through their prescriptions way too fast, and the doctors would eventually be like, I'm not prescribing it to you anymore, to the point then the people would try to go to another doctor and try to get it from another doctor. But there's actually a whole state thing that kind of like tracks different controlled substances across different pharmacies. So if they're trying to get prescribed different medications from different doctors, it'll alert them, and they kind of try to figure out who's abusing drugs. And that's kind of like the argument with being prescribed pain medication in the first place, is you start out for a normal reason, trying to fix your pain, but you become addicted to it, and then the doctor cuts you off, and then what are you supposed to do? You're addicted to drugs.
And if you can't get them. There's a article I found from the New York Times, which was just from 2 days ago, about this case, and it says that in 2017, Phillips tried to apply for so-called line of duty benefits for injuries that he obtained while in the NFL, but he had some trouble getting the paperwork from his former teams. So it says it's unclear as to how many of Adams' 6 former teams provided injury records, which is quite interesting. So it sounds like he was probably having some financial issues, some addiction issues, some issues with family members. It seems like he also, the same as Chris Benoit, had a lot of things going on that contributed as well as the CTE. Yeah. The article also from the New York Times, I'll put it up, it's titled CTE Tests May Not Fully Explain NFL Players' Shooting Sprees. And it finishes with an interesting line, which I do kind of agree. It says, it's easy to have a monocausal explanation because it allows us to sleep better at night. When we look at our own lives, we know that's not true. So I do agree with that in some points. Would he have done this if he didn't have CTE? Who knows? But, it's one of those things that it's probably not the only reason why it happened, if that makes sense. That's my thought anyway.
Yeah, it's
hard because, he wouldn't have had these issues if he didn't, in terms of Phillip, he wouldn't have had the issues about, leaving the NFL and having injuries and all that if he didn't do all that. But it
kind of seems like it's like hard to say because there's so much going on, but it seems kind of like all these athletes, WWE, NFL, they kind of all lead similar lives in a way and kind of have a similar experience, whereas, they have the money, the fame in some aspects. They start, you have sports injuries, you start abusing drugs because, 1, you have the money to do them. Who cares? 2, you're injured. It makes you feel better. But then on top of that, you have these traumatic brain injuries mixed with the drugs, the stress, the exhausting work schedule. How is someone expected to stay healthy under those circumstances in a way? It's kind of like the grass is always greener, where you're like, yeah, I'd love to be a second string player making $3 million from my shoes here, but at what cost? I'm pretty sure even, this is just from memory, but I think it was the same with Aaron Hernandez. He, obviously NFL player, similar story, but I think that he also was abusing or like over-prescribed a painkiller as well. So it kind of seems like it's the same story, just slightly different for all of them. Plus with the trauma of like having Phillip Adams having to take care of his mom and all that. And it seems like they all had, Chris Benoit's the death of all his friends. It's like you have all that.
It's not like they had nothing else going on. They didn't have these amazing, great lives that just all of a sudden snapped. They had both had a lot of different things going on.
Yeah. And I think what I said earlier, like one of the maybe Alzheimer's symptoms or CTE symptoms or something, it was like difficult with like mental, kind of like dealing with your emotions during challenging times. And it kind of seems like that is what was happening to a lot of them.
So I know that you've written down some points here, which we've just kind of touched on as well. But in terms of CTE itself, that the disease has been tied to memory lapses, loss of focus, and problems following directions and handling everyday chores. But researchers have only found associations, not causal links between the disease and many symptoms. And this is kind of what we touched on too. It says, it remains difficult and perhaps impossible to determine a motive after a suicide because so many factors can play a role, including persistent mental distress and drug use. And that's from the New York Times as well. So I do feel like that's true. I don't know, like it's hard for me to kind of express, but all those things, memory lapses, can't concentrate, anxiety, depression, all of those seem to have a link to CTE and they could all cause suicide. So it's just, but then there's other people who don't have CTE who also have those symptoms, if that makes sense.
But there's also people who have CTE who don't murder, suicide people or kill anyone or kill themselves. So I guess it's one of those things where they just need to do more research on it, but I don't know.
And I guess because there's nothing I said, like, for mental illness, you can sometimes treat with medication and things like that, but I don't know the effects. Like, can you treat the CTE symptoms with medication or is it too far gone because it's actually embedded in your brain?
Yeah, you're just missing brain basically.
Yeah, like is there anything you can do to treat the symptoms of CTE? I don't know. And maybe that's what happens. Like they try and it also seems too, which is true, that both Chris and Phillip suffered head injuries but never took time off work to heal properly, which is something that was mentioned in the lawsuit against the WWE. So I guess in both their careers, kind of time is of the essence, especially for the NFL. You're young, you only get a set amount of years usually to play. You don't want to be taking 3 months off to heal because that's the whole season gone basically.
Yeah, and they said Chris never missed a match, never missed a call or anything. And then they also said Phillip, he only missed one game an entire season after.
Even though he had double concussion. Yeah.
So it just seems like even without the CTE, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
I don't know a lot about, but just something that I noticed from Chris's story and just Aaron Hernandez and even just other not CTE related things that even with the moms who kill their kids, just in times where there's a murder suicide, it seems like a lot of people turn to religion. And I know that it's not always a sign of mental illness, but a lot of times when it's religious delusions, it's a red flag. But even with Chris Benoit, they said, I think it was Nancy's sister that said he didn't really have a set religion. He just randomly started getting into religion when kind of things started going bad. And with Aaron Hernandez, I know he wrote, before he killed himself, he wrote a Bible verse on the wall.
He wrote John 3:16 on the wall, which it was. I think he wrote John 3:16 on his head as well and on the wall, and that means the passage is, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believe in him should not perish but have everlasting life." He wrote that on blood, I think, in blood on the forehead and the wall as well.
But just that made me kind of wonder why that happens. I don't really have an answer for it, but I tried to look into it a little and I found something that said having an increased focus on religion or religious activities is a possible symptom of mania or hypomania in bipolar disorder. This heightened focus isn't necessarily unique to bipolar disorder. However, it's also associated with schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, and other psychotic disorders. And having religious delusions has been found to be associated with a more serious course of illness and poorer outcomes. Research has shown that patients with religious delusions have more severe psychotic symptoms, a longer history of illness and poor functioning prior on the onset of the psychotic episode. So it made me wonder if people like Chris or Aaron Hernandez or whoever, their minds are just like so messed up at the time that the only thing they could think of to look to is like religion to explain it.
Yeah, I guess it's so, I don't know. I guess religion is something that everyone kind of knows about to an extent. So it's just, yeah, it's interesting that that's what comes out during these episodes.
Yeah, I'd like to I tried to look into it briefly and there's just like so much, but like also nothing at the same time. But I just think it's interesting how many people in these times of suicide, murder-suicide, suddenly turn to religion when they weren't really religious in the first place.
One thing
I guess it gives them hope in a way.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say, because one thought that I had is that maybe they're looking at the end for redemption for whatever reason. Like they know that they shouldn't, like Aaron Hernandez shouldn't have murdered people. Chris Benoit murdered his family. He probably knew that wasn't the right thing to do. So, and in the end, they're kind of turning and looking for that final forgiveness before they move on to whatever afterlife they believe in.
Yeah, just kind of like a last desperate.
Yeah, last attempt.
But even like Lori Vallow is another example where she thinks she's a friggin' prophet or whatever.
She thinks she's an angel. Oh no, she thinks she's a god. She's a god as well.
A deity
in love with the angels or whatever she is.
Yeah, but not something I have a lot of knowledge on.
Yeah, it is fascinating.
In terms of like psychology, but just something after talking about all these crimes, I've noticed it so many times that I just think it's interesting. So maybe if anyone has any background information on that, let us know and I'll share it on the next episode.
Definitely.
Another argument is, should CTE be a defense for murder? I feel like yes and no. Like we were saying before, there's a lot of people probably with CTE that don't murder.
And there's a lot of other people who use other conditions like, mental illness or insanity here because they're not capable of being responsible for their actions, I guess.
Yeah. It just sucks that CTE can't be diagnosed basically unless they're dead. Because that was the issue with like Aaron Hernandez, I think, was that they couldn't prove he had CTE, but once he killed himself, they were like, oh, wait, he actually has really bad CTE. But at the time, the jury couldn't be told that he definitely had CTE.
I wonder if it's something that they're going to start using from now on as a likely argument. So would this person played football for 5 years, so, he might have a CTE, so that might explain why he killed 10 people and things like that.
Yeah. And it also just sucks because it seems like since there's no definite way to prove it, it does seem like something that could easily be exploited by people who maybe don't have CTE, but played contact sports in college, but haven't played for 10 years, but maybe they have CTE. Or
I don't know. There's surely got to be some other way. They can diagnose almost everything these days. I should be a scientist. There surely has to be some way. Maybe that's what they're working on. I don't know. But
yeah.
Anyway, I guess, this is such a new science, essentially. It's, only been around for maybe 20 years or however long since they've actually started looking into it. So maybe as time progresses, they'll find different ways to diagnose it.
Yeah. I do think it's definitely true, though, that CTE is a thing and has made Chris and Phillip and whoever else, Aaron Hernandez, I guess. The one that I believe the most for some reason is Chris Benoit because it was just so random and crazy.
Yeah.
And then you see how bad his brain was deteriorated. It's just wild to think that your brain can just deteriorate like that. But I guess it makes sense. If you keep injuring your brain over and over again when it's not healed,
die a bit.
It's gonna disintegrate. It's just so scary to think that can happen.
And for you to not even be aware of it, most other illnesses,
it must be such a crazy feeling
to just start losing control.
Chris Benoit clearly had some sort of self-awareness to it but he started asking that other Chris guy who was kind of studying CTE and had concussions, he was asking him about concussions and how many he's had and what effects he had. I feel like Chris did kind of know that it affected him in a negative way, which is sad.
I think a lot of also in terms of that kind of thing, but for football players, for a lot of them, it's such a big transition when they finish playing without having this other, CTE trauma to deal with. Like it's just, they go from living and breathing in football for however many years to having to live a normal life. And it's the same for any athlete, I guess, in any sport. Once you can't do it anymore, it'd be such a big, such a big change. Big adjustment. Yeah. And no doubt that some people don't deal with it very well.
Yeah. Do you think that CTE contributed to one or both of them?
Yes. Yeah, I definitely, I'm the same. I do think it definitely did for Chris Benoit, and I do think it did also for Phillip Adams, but I probably am wondering to what extent it contributed to him. I think there was probably other things going on with Phillip Adams more so than Chris Benoit.
Information out about Chris Benoit now.
Yeah, true. And maybe as more comes out about Phillip Adams, we'll be able to, better make a call on that. But no, I definitely do. I think, that there's no doubt that CTE contributed to Phillip's actions. To what extent, I'm not sure.
Knowing all this now, would you let one of your kids play like one of these contact sports? I feel like I wouldn't.
I was just going to say it's actually not funny, but actually good timing, because after this I have to go and watch my husband play rugby union. He's 40.
Oh my God.
I know, he's 40.
Forgot he plays rugby.
40 years old, and every year he's like, I'm not going to play, and every year he keeps playing. So, so I have to go and watch him do that.
Stop.
I know. So I don't know. I would, because especially, with that research that you spoke about earlier, where it said the kids who are in high school didn't really have much evidence of CTE and all that.
That's true.
But as it's something I would definitely worry about for an older, or a professional athlete, I guess, is probably the right.
Like, you can play up until high school.
That's it. Then you gotta go and be a nerd.
I don't care how good you are.
Go and do something else like swimming. Be a swimmer.
Yeah, just crazy.
It is crazy. Hopefully we learn some more about Phillip's stuff when
I saw that it could take a few months for that test to come back, but once it comes back, we will definitely mention it in the podcast because I'm very curious. Imagine it's like no CTE detected.
I'll have to eat my words then.
Yeah.
I feel like it's becoming one of those things that when something like this happens now, people go to it first, whereas before it was like, oh, actually, maybe this is why it happened. But now they're saying that this was probably a factor for Phillip Adams's case straight off the bat.
Yeah. I mean, even like that was the first thing I thought of when I first heard the story, and then saw he was an ex-NFL player. I'm pretty sure I was like, oh, they're definitely going to say CTE for this one. And
I also think because there's no other real obvious motive. Like I know we spoke about him maybe being a patient of the doctor and all that, but for him just to turn like this, most normal people don't do that.
But it's also like, sure, like in a normal world, not normal world, but like in a regular-ish, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but if he was a drug addict, was addicted to drugs, you get mad about it, like kill the doctor, but he also killed the doctor, his wife, two kids, two random people. Like that's wild.
Yeah, exactly. He like totally snapped.
Like he killed babies, basically.
Terrible.
But yeah, that's that. That's the CTE episode. I don't know. I think it's really interesting. So hopefully you guys did too. Let us know what you think. Again,
put it up on the blog.
Beg you guys to go leave good reviews, so it'll keep me motivated to think of more interesting topics. Like we've said, we'll put the pictures and everything up of the brains, the picture of Chris and Eddie hugging.
I'll put any autopsies up if you're morbid like me and you want to read them.
Yep, all autopsies. We'll put everything on our blog at truecrimesocietyblog.com. Make sure you join our forum, truecrimesociety.com. We have a subreddit now. We still have our Facebook group, but it is kind of not defunct, but
inactive,
censored. Yeah, inactive kind of right now until Facebook gets its shit together and stops trying to ban us. But check it all out. If you like the podcast, you have other friends like True Crime, tell them to check it out. Maybe they'll like it too.
Yes.
We will see you guys in 2 weeks then. Sorry we can't be weekly. 2 weeks.
One day,
See you guys then.
Bye.
Bye.